Michael Madsen, Harvey Keitel, Steve Buscemi, and a whole host of other guys star in Reservoir Dogs, our movie we're going to be reviewing this week on the Brothers Review Show. Reservoir Dogs is written and directed by Quentin Tarantino. It was the first movie that he wrote and directed. It is a diamond heist movie, but we never actually see the diamond heist. Very clever way of making a movie. The movie follows about 5 or 6 of the, I want to call them bad guys, but they're the stars of the movie, the guys that are involved in the diamond heist, kind of before and after, and what they go through and their interactions with each other. The heist obviously goes south, something goes wrong. They very quickly determine that it was a setup, and they must have a rat in the mix, and they don't know who it is, and they're all yelling at each other. Some of them get killed right away. It's a mess, and the movie follows, I would say 3 or 4 guys pretty closely. So this movie is not told chronologically. And Tarantino has gotten a lot of flack for that over the years, and people accuse him of just using that as a gimmick. And his response to that is, well, if I thought the movie would work better told chronologically, I would tell it that way. But I think it works better like this, and I think he's right, especially in this movie, because what we see is the characters unfold before we see the plot unfold. And so when the plot does unfold, we're already invested in these characters. We already know them. We've seen them interact with each other. You never hear anything like this. So put in another movie from that era, 1991-ish. Lethal Weapon 2, or any other action movie from that era.
And stop or my mom will shoot.
And listen to the dialogue of those movies. It's one cliche after another. You could almost finish the sentences of half of the characters in those movies. Not Reservoir Dogs. This dialogue is so inventive and creative. The way these guys talk to each other, you've never heard anything else like this. And 30 years later, this still holds up. You watch this movie, you could listen to an audio version of this and still be entertained. There's no cliches whatsoever. The way the guys talk to each other, the banter back and forth, they don't even really know each other. They've all been brought together by this kind of criminal mastermind who's organizing this heist. They immediately start kind of bickering and arguing over, tipping a waitress and just these kind of trivial things that you wouldn't think bad guys would talk about, but they do talk about it. And it's very, very entertaining. There's nothing else like it. But when this movie came out, there was nothing else like it. There was nothing else like it. The acting is superb. Every actor in this movie knocks it out of the park. Harvey Keitel, Steve Buscemi. I think Steve Buscemi is my favorite in this movie. He is so good. He's kind of wormy. He's the one that figures out right away that they've got a rat in the house. One of the first things he says, he storms back into the room. He's like, was that a setup or what? And everyone else is like trying to process what happened. And I don't know. I haven't had time to think about it. He knew right away. He's probably the smartest character in the movie. Then we get some backstories on the characters. Mostly the Tim Roth character, who actually is the rat Mr. Pink talked about. We get backstories from Mr. Blonde, played by Michael Madsen. That sets his character up really nicely. So the movie's plot just kind of culminates in the warehouse / rendezvous point with all these characters yelling at each other and pointing guns at each other. And there's kind of this Mexican standoff situation, which is really entertaining. And Tarantino likes to do that in his movies because it's always very tense. And that's kind of the basic gist of the movie. It was popular because there was nothing else like it. The dialogue, the acting, it got a lot of grief for being violent, but like a lot of Tarantino movies, it's not as violent as you think it is. It's really not. There's only about 2 or 3 scenes of violence in this movie. And one of them is the famous torture scene. But even then, they don't actually show a close-up of that. The camera pulls away before it actually happens. This movie is fantastic. It holds up really well. I give it a 9 out of 10. It's not my favorite Tarantino movie, but it's up there. One of my favorite characters is Michael Madsen's character. He plays Mr. Blonde. He's so menacing. All the other characters are talking about what a madman he was and how he just started shooting up the store and how they can't even trust this guy anymore. He comes in with like a soda from 7-Eleven. He's just like drinking it through a straw. He's cool as can be. He never raises his voice. He's so calm and so menacing. They're like, would you have time to... Where are the French fries? You had time to stop and get a Coke? And he's just kind of sitting back.
No, and then he says, oh, I ate those already.
Yeah. He's so menacing. He's so good. Just fantastic. There's a scene in this movie that really tells you how great the movie is. Tim Roth, who plays Mr. Orange, he is the undercover cop. He is the rat, right? We don't actually find out he's the rat until probably halfway through the movie. 1 hour into the movie, we find out he's a rat. Mr. Orange tells a story that never actually happened. It's an anecdote that was given to him by his superior to share with these other bad guys to make him look like he fits in really well with them. About a time when he had some weed on him and he went into a public restroom and there were a bunch of cops in there with like a drug sniffing dog. And this story that he tells is so tense and so nail biting, and it never even happened. Like that's the way this movie is. That's how great this movie is, that they can tell a story like that and still have it be really tense. So there's my review of Reservoir Dogs. What do you think, Phil? Tell me what you think.
I love this movie.
Yeah.
I think I agree with everything you said. I'll add some to it. Chris Penn is wonderful. Tim Roth at one point told somebody that his only job was to get Joe Cabot. And now Joe Cabot was the leader of this whole heist operation. He was everybody's boss. Played by Lawrence Tierney, an old guy that plays Elaine Bennis' dad in an episode of Seinfeld, if you've ever... So that might give you a clue of who he is. Nice Guy Eddie is Joe Cabot's son, played by Chris Penn. Mm-hmm. Chris Penn is so good in this movie.
Yeah.
Oh, he's so much fun to watch. The reunion with Michael Madsen, which is a little bit of a backstory, when the two of them, it's so good. They start wrestling like little kids. He gets up off the floor. He's got sweat running down his face. You know, Chris Penn character. He's like breathing heavily. Like clearly, like I mean, this is how to direct here. But you nailed it with the characters. I mean, Steve Buscemi should have won an Oscar for this movie. He's so good. He's a professional. And he kept telling everyone the whole time, was like, act like a professional. Am I the only professional? Like, how many times did he say that? Act like a professional. You know, guys are pointing guns at each other. They're supposed to be on the same team. But he knew it. He nailed it. He walked into that rendezvous and he was just like, dude, that was a setup. And Harvey Keitel's response was like, oh, geez, I guess I didn't even have a chance to think yet. I don't know. I mean... And he slowly starts to convince everybody. But he's just wonderful. And you know, you mentioned the dialogue. The dialogue, it's like, it's just poetic. Everything everybody says is poetic. Like there's a scene in The Office when setting up Harvey Keitel's backstory, who plays Mr. White. So he's just sitting down with the boss, Joe. He clearly was recently summoned there by Joe. And Harvey Keitel sits down and he says, so explain the telegram. He didn't say, oh, why am I here? He said, explain the telegram. That's just, that kind of dialogue you don't hear. I mean, obviously he didn't send a telegram. Hearing that kind of poetry just come out of their mouths in this movie. And that's how everybody talks. They don't say anything that's cliche. He's talking to Joe about, the diamonds. Well, how are we going to get the diamonds? What are we going to do with them? And he says, how do we move the ice afterwards? Like, oh, that's such a great line.
Yeah.
And even at the age of 13, when I first saw this movie, I was like, move the ice? Oh, yeah. How do you unload the diamonds? That's what he means.
Who do you sell it to? Right?
Who do you
sell
sell?
Your buyers?
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
But he didn't say, how do you resell the diamonds? He said, how do you move the ice? That's just poetry. Yeah. This is like Simon and Garfunkel have written a movie or something.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Harvey Keitel is wonderful. He is one of the best actors probably of all time. He was the first one that Tarantino hired for this movie. Tarantino was in Los Angeles. He was gathering actors for his movie. He wanted Harvey Keitel because that was like his favorite actor at that time. Harvey Keitel read the script and was like, I'm in. And Harvey Keitel convinced Tarantino that they needed to go to New York to get their other actors, because they were just going to audition for their other actors.
Harvey Keitel is fantastic. I will say this, if I had one complaint, it's probably Tim Roth. I just feel like all of the other characters outshine him a little bit. He's British. His American accent in this movie is not very good.
I've heard Tarantino talk about that, because when they cast him for this role, that was what people were saying was, are you worried about Tim Roth and that he's not going to sound right because he has to do an American accent? And Tarantino's response was, he's an actor. That's what they do. They act. Like, yeah, he's not American, but he's acting like he's an American, and he's going to do fine. I don't know. I love his character. I think it's great. I don't have a problem with it. If there's a weak actor in the whole movie, it's Tarantino himself, who, to be fair, doesn't have a very big role, but he's not a great actor.
I think he's okay. I just think Tim Roth's character, his backstory is rather lengthy, and it is a little bit slow. Now, you mentioned the one part of the amusing anecdote in the bathroom that never even happened, right? Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, they even have footage of it.
Yeah.
But it never happened.
And it's really tense.
Yeah.
And you know it never happened.
Yeah.
Because he tells you this is made up.
Yeah.
And it's still really tense.
Yeah. But it gets a little slow during his whole backstory because they tell quite a bit of it. And I just think Tim Roth's character and acting, he's just outshined by everybody just a little bit, I think. That's just my own opinion. But I agree with you. I'm giving the movie a 9 out of 10. And in fact, I toyed with giving it a 10 out of 10. I just couldn't quite bring myself there. Okay. Plot-wise, yeah, not a whole lot going on. There's a diamond heist. We don't even see it. It's basically just a bunch of bad guys who are all arguing with each other, injured, killed, whatnot, and then showing us all their backstories. How did they get here? How do they know each other? And that is what is so interesting to me. And just listening to them talk. We also need to talk about the soundtrack of this movie.
Oh, yeah.
The soundtrack is fantastic. They are all listening to the music in the movie. It's not like they're just playing these songs, and it's mostly 70s rock, right? And it's not like they're just playing it over these scenes. But no, the actors themselves, the characters themselves are listening to it. You can even see at one point Tim Roth turns the radio off, music stops just like that, right? They're always talking about it. They're singing along to it. They're dancing. I mean, the famous torture scene, Michael Madsen dances around to that song. And how can you not? It's so good.
Yeah.
All the music is wonderful. And it introduced me to a lot of this music.
Yep,
I did not know these songs. All this 70s music was foreign to me. I was born in 79. I was raised in the 80s and 90s. I never listened to it. When I discovered Reservoir Dogs, it was like, wow, I can't believe there's all this great music that I never heard before.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd never heard of Steeler's Wheel before this movie.
No.
Yeah. It's so original. Like, I understand it didn't have a conventional plot. You could say that the telling the story out of sequence was gimmicky. But even if I agreed to that, man, you've never heard dialogue like this anywhere else. It's not a kid's movie. There's a lot of swearing. I get it.
Yeah. Don't let your kids watch it. There's swearing. There's pretty vulgar conversations.
Yeah. You
don't want your kids watching that. There is some violence too. That's a little. It can be, even though you're right, they don't show in detail a guy's ear getting cut off, but like you can see it afterwards, and it's pretty gross.
Yeah.
It's not a kid's movie at all.
Yeah. Yeah. The torture scene maybe turned some people off, but it's too bad because it's such a great movie to listen to. Ask yourself this question. Would you want to listen to this movie as just an audio CD?
100%.
Without even seeing it?
100%.
Would you want to listen to The Mummy Returns as an audio CD? Or Armageddon? Yeah.
There's a scene where Chris Penn is talking to Michael Madsen, and they're kind of catching up and everything, and the idea is Michael Madsen wants to come back to work, but he's got this parole officer that's just a pain. Yeah, this stupid parole officer.
Scagnetti.
Seymour Scagnetti is his name, and I just noticed this. This is such a great moment. Lawrence Tierney, Joe Cabot, he's just like, isn't that amazing? He says, some jungle bunny slits some old woman's throat for a quarter. He gets Doris Day for a parole officer. He says, nice guy like you And you get this Scagnetti fellow. Like, that's just not fair. And it's like, man, the mind of these bad guys to think that they're somehow better than the guy that slit an old lady's throat for a quarter. They're no better than that other guy. But bad guys don't see themselves as being bad because they see themselves as, well, this is justified.
Yeah.
It's just...
I mean, in the beginning of the movie, these bad guys are sympathetic to a waitress who only makes minimum wage.
Yeah.
You don't... What other movie do you hear bad guys talk like that?
Never.
Never.
Absolutely never.
Like, they're arguing over tips, leaving a tip at a restaurant because these poor waitresses is the only job they can get and still feed their families without a college degree and so forth. And these are bad guys talking like this.
Yeah. It's wonderful.
Yeah, you don't hear that anywhere else.
You don't hear dialogue. And there's another scene where Chris Penn is talking to Michael Madsen and about getting a job. And he goes, oh, we'll just get you at the dock workers union. It's like, good pay, everything like that. Michael Madsen's like, I don't want to lift any crates. He goes, no, you don't understand. You don't even got to show up. We'll fix the books so that you're there working, but you're not there working. And if somebody comes to check up on you, your parole officer comes to check up on you, sorry. Yeah, we sent him over to Tustin to pick up a load.
Just
come
missed
back.
him.
You just missed him. He comes back in. He's over at some airfield picking up another load of stuff. That's the beauty of this job. We got places all over the place. Like, what a great line. We got places all over the place.
What's more to say about Reservoir Dogs? I don't know.
I don't know. Let us know what you think about the movie if you've seen it. If not, go watch it. Don't bring your kids, but seek this movie out.
Yeah.
It's on Netflix right now as of today, because I watched it today again on Netflix.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
9 out of 10 for me, 9 out of 10 from Andy.
9 out of 10 movie, 2 thumbs up.
All right. Well, we'll see you next time.